A girl asked her mother to take her to her deceased father's grave, but what they found there made the mother faint. A scream ripped through the quiet pre-dawn hours. Emily bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding, and rushed to the next room. She found Lily sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, tears streaming down her angelic 8-year-old face. "Mommy," Lily sobbed, reaching out with trembling arms. Emily pulled her daughter close, feeling her small body tremble. "Shh, it's okay, honey. It was just a bad dream." But Lily shook her head vehemently. "No, Mommy, it wasn't a bad dream. It was him, it was Daddy." Emily froze, her blood turning to ice. She forced her voice to remain calm. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "I saw Daddy, Mommy, he was there, so real." Lily sniffled, pulling back to look into her mother's eyes. "He was sad, Mommy, asking for help." Emily swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic. "It was just a dream, honey. Your father, he's not with us anymore, remember?" But Lily was already squirming out of her mother's embrace, reaching for her drawing pad on the nightstand. "No, Mommy. Look, I need to draw it before I forget." With an urgency Emily had never seen before, Lily began to scribble furiously on the paper. Lines transformed into shapes, shapes into a face Emily knew so well, the one she had tried so hard to forget. As the drawing took form, Emily felt her world crumble. There, on the paper, was John, her John, with details Lily couldn't possibly know. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the result of a childhood fall, the crooked smile, more pronounced on the right side. Even the way he used to run his hand through his hair when he was nervous. "How?" Emily murmured, unable to tear her eyes away from the drawing. Lily continued drawing, now adding the scenery around John's figure. "He was in a strange place, Mommy. There were lots of trees and a big white house, and he kept looking at a box. A dark wooden box." Emily felt the air leave her lungs. The box. The box where she had stored all of John's photos, all the mementos after the accident. The box hidden in the back of her closet, far from Lily's curious eyes. "He talked to me, Mommy," Lily continued, her voice calmer now, almost dreamy. "He said he needed me. He needed us. That we had to find him." Emily struggled to maintain her composure. "Lily, honey, you know that's not possible. Your father, he's been gone a long time." But the words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. How could she explain the unexplainable? How could she deny the eerie accuracy of the drawing before her? Lily looked at her mother, her eyes, John's eyes, filled with a wisdom beyond her years. "But he's not gone, Mommy. He's waiting for us. We need to find him." A sudden flashback flooded Emily's mind. She saw herself 8 years ago, pregnant and desperate, frantically hiding all of John's pictures. The pain had been too much, the memories unbearable. It had been easier to pretend he never existed, to create a world where Lily could grow up without the ghost of a father she would never know. But now, looking at the extraordinarily accurate drawing and her daughter's determined eyes, Emily felt the walls she had built over the years begin to crumble. "Mommy?" Lily's voice brought her back to the present. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Daddy?" The question, so simple yet so complex, hung in the air between them. Emily opened her mouth to answer, to offer another of the empty excuses she had used over the years, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt hot tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling Lily into another hug. "It's a very long and sad story. But I want to know, Mommy," Lily insisted, her voice muffled against Emily's shoulder. "I need to know. He asked me to help him." Emily pulled back, holding her daughter's face in her hands. She saw in those innocent eyes a determination she knew all too well. The same determination she saw in the mirror every day. The same determination she had seen so many times in John's eyes. "Okay," she finally relented, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll tell you about your father, but not today. Today, we both need to rest." Lily nodded reluctantly, but before Emily could stand, the girl grabbed her hand. "Mommy, promise you'll tell me everything, no secrets." Emily hesitated. Years of secrets and half-truths weighed heavily on her, but looking into her daughter's pleading eyes, she knew there was no more running away. "I promise, honey. no secrets. As she tucked Lily back into bed, Emily felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. The past she had fought so hard to bury was resurfacing, brought to light by a dream and a child's innocent drawing. Returning to her own room, Emily went to the closet. With trembling hands, she pushed aside clothes and shoes, revealing a dark wooden box hidden in the back, the same box from Lily's drawing. Sitting on the edge of the bed, the box heavy in her lap, Emily fought the urge to open it. She knew that once she did, there would be no turning back. All the feelings, all the memories she had suppressed for so long would come flooding back. But the image of Lily's drawing, so vivid and precise, danced in her mind, and her daughter's words echoed in her ears. "He's waiting for us. We need to find him." With a shaky breath, Emily opened the box. The afternoon sun filtered lazily through the cracks in the dusty attic, creating beams of light that danced in the still air. Lily, with her curious eyes and nimble fingers, rummaged through boxes and chests, each object a new discovery, a hidden treasure. It was then that her eyes landed on a worn shoebox, almost hidden behind a stack of old books. With her heart pounding with anticipation, she pulled it towards her, coughing slightly at the cloud of dust that rose. Opening the box, Lily felt as if she had been transported to another world. Yellowed photographs, carefully folded letters, and small trinkets that seemed to hold secret stories filled its interior. With trembling hands, she picked up the first photograph. A young, smiling man looked directly at the camera, his eyes bright even in the faded image. Lily gasped. It was the man from her dream, the man she had drawn nights before, her father. "Daddy," she whispered, running her fingers gently over the image. Delving deeper into the box, Lily found other photos. Her father and mother, much younger, embracing on a beach. The two of them on a picnic, laughing at something out of frame. And then, one that made her heart leap. Her mother, with a round, pregnant belly, and her father kneeling, kissing her stomach reverently. Silent tears began to stream down Lily's face. All these images, all these moments of happiness, and she had never known. Among the photos, she found letters. Carefully unfolding one, she began to read. "My dearest Emily, each day away from you is an eternity. I can't wait to be home, to feel your embrace, to see your smile. And to think that in just a few months, we'll have our little miracle in our arms. You and our baby are my reason for living, my love. Forever yours, John." Lily sobbed softly, imagining her father's voice reading those words. He sounded so in love, so eager to be a father. How could he have died before she was born? It was then that a newspaper clipping caught her eye. The larger black letters of the headline jumped out at her. "Fatal crash on Highway 1. Leaves 1 dead, 2 injured." With her heart pounding, Lily began to read the article. It spoke of a terrible accident, a car that had veered off the road on a rainy night. Her father's name was there, listed as one of the victims. But how? Lily murmured to herself, confused. The date of the accident was just a few months before her birth. If her father had died in that crash, how could he have been alive in her dream? So engrossed was she in her thoughts that she didn't hear the footsteps ascending the attic stairs. "Lily, what are you doing up here?" Emily's voice died in her throat as she saw her daughter sitting on the floor, surrounded by photos and letters she had hidden away for so long. "Mommy." Lily looked up, her eyes filled with tears and confusion. "Why did you never show me these? Why didn't you ever tell me about Daddy?" Emily felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Her vision began to blur at the edges, and she leaned heavily against the wall, struggling to breathe. "Mom!" Lily cried, frightened, rushing to hold Emily before she fell. Lily's cry attracted the attention of Mrs. Davis, their elderly neighbor who was visiting that afternoon. With surprising agility for her age, she climbed the attic stairs. "Good heavens, Emily!" Mrs. Davis exclaimed, helping to guide the younger woman to sit in an old rocking chair. "Take a deep breath, dear. It's all right." As Emily struggled to control her breathing, Mrs. Davis looked around, noticing the scattered photos and Lily's frightened expression. "Ah," she said softly, understanding in her wise eyes. "It seems the secrets of the past have finally come to light." Lily, still holding her mother's hand, looked pleadingly at their neighbor. "Mrs. Davis, do you know anything about this? About my father?" The old woman sighed deeply, looking from Lily to Emily, who now seemed to have regained some of her color. "Perhaps, Mrs. Davis said gently, "It's time to tell the truth, Emily. This girl deserves to know about her father." Emily closed her eyes, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. When she opened them again, there was a mixture of pain and resignation in her gaze. "You're right," she whispered. I don't know where to begin. How about at the beginning?" Mrs. Davis suggested, sitting down on the floor next to Lily. Emily nodded slowly and then, with a trembling voice, she began to speak. It was almost 9 years ago. The world around Emily seemed to fade away as she lost herself in the memories. It was a rainy Friday night. Emily, 6 months pregnant, anxiously awaited John's return from a business trip. He had promised to be home for dinner, but the hours ticked by with no sign of him. The phone rang, making Emily jump. Her heart clenched as she heard the deep, official voice on the other end. "Mrs. Miller, this is Sergeant Johnson from the Highway Patrol. I'm sorry to inform you, but there's been an accident." The words that followed were a blur. Serious accident. "Car went off the road, a heavy rain. 3 victims. Your husband, he's in critical condition. He's been taken to St. Joseph's Hospital." Emily barely remembered how she got to the hospital. All she knew was that suddenly she was in a cold, sterile corridor, surrounded by doctors with grim expressions. "Mom, we did everything we could, but..." She didn't hear the rest. The world spun, went dark, and Emily felt herself falling. When she woke up, hours later, it was to a world where John no longer existed, or so she was told. Back in the present, Emily looked at her daughter, whose eyes were wide with shock and sadness. I couldn't handle the pain," Emily continued, her voice barely a whisper. "So I hid everything. All the photos, all the memories. I thought it would be easier for you to grow up without knowing, without missing someone you never met." Lily, silent tears streaming down her face, squeezed her mother's hand. "But Mommy, what if Daddy didn't die that day?" Emily looked at her daughter, confused. "What do you mean?" "My dream, Mommy. It felt so real. And now these photos. He's alive somewhere, I can feel it." Mrs. Davis, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "You know, Emily, sometimes children's dreams are more than just dreams. Maybe it's time to uncover the full truth about that night." Emily looked at the scattered photos, at the newspaper clipping, and then at her daughter's hopeful face. Something inside her, a flame that had been extinguished long ago, began to flicker back to life. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe you're right. Maybe it's time we find out what really happened to your father." And so, in that dusty attic, surrounded by fragments of the past, mother and daughter made a silent pact. Together, they would unearth the truth, no matter how painful or surprising it might be. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and toast filled the kitchen as Lily entered, her eyes still heavy from a restless night. Emily stood with her back to the door, her hands trembling slightly as she held a mug. "Morning, Mum," Lily said softly, breaking the tense silence. Emily turned, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning, sweetie. Sleep well?" Lily shook her head. "I dreamt about him again, Mom." Emily's smile faltered, and she placed the mug on the table with a soft clink. "Oh, honey." "Mom," Lily began, her voice gaining strength, "we need to go visit Daddy's grave." The mug slipped from Emily's grasp, spilling coffee across the white tablecloth. She didn't seem to notice. "What? Please, Mom," Lily pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. I need to say goodbye to him properly." Emily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was pain in their depths. "Lily, you don't understand. It's too painful. I can't. But I need to, Mom." Lily's voice rose, frustration and sadness mingling. "You've had years to say goodbye. I never had the chance." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She pushed away from the table, turning towards the window. "You don't know what you're asking, sweetie. That place, those memories. Lily approached, gently touching her mother's arm. I know it's hard, Mom, but in my dream, Daddy was there. He was waiting for us. Emily turned abruptly. What do you mean? In my dream, Lily began, her voice trembling with emotion. Daddy was standing next to a grave, but it wasn't his. It was a grave with the name David Miller on it. Emily paled visibly. How do you know that name? It was on the tombstone, Mom. And Daddy kept pointing to it, like he wanted to show us something important. Emily stumbled to a chair, sinking into it heavily. David Miller. He was the driver of the other car in the accident. He died instantly. Lily knelt beside her mother, taking her hands. See, Mom, how could I know that? It has to mean something. We need to go there. Emily looked into her daughter's pleading eyes, seeing in them a mixture of determination and hope that was painfully familiar. It was the same look John had when he was convinced of something. Lily, Emily began, her voice low and weary, you have to understand. After the accident, after losing your father, I broke. Burying all those memories was the only way I could cope, the only way I could be strong for you. But Mom, Lily insisted gently, don't you see that by doing that, you also buried a part of me, a part I didn't even know existed until now? Lily's words hung in the air, heavy with truth and unspoken accusation. Emily felt the tears she had held back for so long begin to fall. I just wanted to protect you, she sobbed. I wanted to spare you the pain I felt. Lily embraced her mother, her own tears mingling with Emily's. I know, Mom, I know. But now we need to face this together. Please, let me know my father, even if it's just by visiting where he rests. For long minutes, mother and daughter held each other, sharing a grief that, for so long, had been carried solely by Emily. When they finally separated, there was a new understanding in both their eyes. Emily took a deep breath, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Okay, she said finally, her voice hoarse but resolute. We'll visit your father's grave. Lily's face lit up with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Emily nodded, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. But we need to prepare. The cemetery, it's in another town. We'll have to take a short trip. The following hours were a flurry of activity. Emily, with trembling hands, retrieved a small suitcase she hadn't used in years from the back of the closet. Lily, eager to help, scurried around, gathering clothes and essentials. Mom, Lily called, holding a framed photo of John they had found in the attic. Can we take this? Emily looked at the photo, feeling a pang in her heart. It was a picture of John smiling, taken just a few months before the accident. His eyes shone with the same light she now saw in her daughter's eyes. Yes, she replied softly. Yes, we'll take it. As they packed, Emily found herself telling Lily little stories about John, how he loved to sing in the shower, always off-key, how he insisted on making pancakes every Sunday morning, even though he always burned the first batch. Lily drank in every word, her eyes shining with each new detail about the father she never knew. For her, it was as if a missing piece of herself was finally being filled. As the sun began to set, the suitcases were packed. Emily looked at her daughter, seeing in her a mixture of anxiety and determination. We're really doing this, aren't we? Emily asked, more to herself than to Lily. Yes, Mom, Lily replied, taking her mother's hand. Together. Emily nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and surprisingly hope. As she locked the door to their house, she couldn't help but think that this trip might be more than just a visit to a grave. It might be the beginning of a journey to uncover the truth about the past and, perhaps, find a path to the future. With one last look at the house that held so many memories, mother and daughter set off, ready to face whatever fate had in store for them. The morning dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky shared the emotional weight of the journey Emily and Lily were about to embark on. The bus station was almost deserted, save for a few solitary souls who, like them, had pressing reasons to travel on such a dreary day. Lily clutched a bouquet of white lilies in one hand and her sketchbook in the other. Her eyes, normally bright with curiosity, were clouded with apprehension and anticipation. Are you sure you want to do this, honey? Emily asked for the umpteenth time, her voice betraying her own anxiety. Lily nodded firmly. I am, Mom. We need to do this. As they boarded the nearly empty bus, Emily couldn't help but notice how much older, more mature Lily seemed. It was as if the discovery about her father had accelerated her growth in some way. They settled into seats near the middle of the bus. Lily immediately opened her sketchbook, running her fingers gently over the portrait of her father, as if trying to absorb every detail. The bus engine rumbled to life, beginning their journey. Emily stared out the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass, forming tiny rivers that seemed to mirror the tears she was fighting to hold back. Not long after they departed, an elderly woman boarded, her grey eyes scanning the interior before settling on Emily and Lily. With an enigmatic smile, she took the seat in front of them. A dreary day for a trip, isn't it? The woman remarked, turning to face them. Emily simply nodded politely, hoping the conversation would end there. But the woman continued, her eyes fixed on Lily's sketchbook. What a lovely portrait, she said, leaning closer for a better look. A loved one, I presume. Lily, ever open and friendly, answered before Emily could interject. It's my dad. We're going to visit him. The woman raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting between mother and daughter. I see, she murmured, her voice heavy with a meaning Emily couldn't decipher. Sometimes, the journeys we take to find the dead lead us to surprising discoveries among the living. A shiver ran down Emily's spine. There was something in the woman's tone, as if she knew more than she let on. What do you mean by that? Emily asked, unable to contain her curiosity. The elderly woman smiled, a smile that seemed to hold ancient secrets. Only that things aren't always what they seem, my dear, especially when it comes to love and loss. Before Emily could question her further, the woman turned back around, ending the conversation as abruptly as she had begun it. The rest of the journey passed in tense silence, broken only by the sound of the rain against the bus windows and the occasional rustle of a page turning in Lily's sketchbook. For Emily, every mile traveled seemed to transport her back in time. Flashbacks began to flood her mind, so vivid she could almost smell the antiseptic of the hospital, hear the monotonous beeping of the heart monitors. She saw herself again on that fateful night, running through the hospital corridors, her heart pounding so hard it threatened to burst from her chest. The doctor's voice echoed in her ears. I'm so sorry, Mum. We did everything we could. Mum, are you okay? Lily's concerned voice brought her back to the present. Emily blinked, realizing that silent tears had been streaming down her cheeks. I'm fine, honey, she lied, forcing a smile. Just remembering. Lily squeezed her mother's hand, a simple gesture filled with understanding. It's going to be okay, Mum. We're in this together. After what felt like an eternity, the bus finally arrived in the small town where John was supposedly buried. The rain had subsided to a light drizzle, shrouding everything in an ethereal mist. As they walked down Main Street, Emily felt a strange sensation, as if she were walking in a dream. Every building, every corner seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. The cemetery should be just past that church, Emily murmured, more to herself than to Lily. But when they reached the indicated spot, they found only an empty lot, surrounded by construction hoardings. I don't understand, Emily said, confusion evident in her voice. It should be here. Lily, sensing her mother's growing desperation, approached a man passing by. Excuse me, sir, do you know where the cemetery is? The man looked at them with a surprised expression. The old cemetery? Oh, it was relocated about 5 years ago. It's on the outskirts of town now, near the river. Emily felt her legs weaken. 5 years. The cemetery had been moved 5 years ago, and she hadn't even known. How could she have become so detached? Come on, Mum, Lily said gently, guiding Emily along. We can get a cab there. The ride to the new cemetery was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. As they drew closer, Emily felt her heart quicken. Years of repressed emotions threatened to spill over. The cab pulled up in front of a large wrought-iron gate. Beyond it, rows of tombstones stretched as far as the eye could see, some new and gleaming, others weathered by time. Lily was the first to exit the car, her bouquet of white lilies a stark contrast to the somber surroundings. Emily followed more slowly, each step feeling like a ton of bricks. As they walked among the graves, the tension was palpable. Lily, determined in her mission, led the way, occasionally consulting a map they had obtained at the entrance. Suddenly, she stopped, her eyes fixed on a tombstone a few yards ahead. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I think we found it." Emily looked in the direction indicated, her heart nearly stopping as she saw the name engraved on the stone, John Miller. But before they could approach, something caught Lily's eye. She let out a small gasp of surprise, pointing to a nearby grave. "Mom, look! It's the name from my dream." And there it was, exactly as Lily had described, David Miller. Emily felt the world spin around her. How could her daughter have known? What did it all mean? As they approached the two graves side by side, Emily couldn't help but feel they were on the verge of a revelation that would change their lives forever. St. Michael's Cemetery loomed before them, a sea of headstones and angel statues stretching as far as the eye could see. The iron gate creaked ominously as Emily pushed it open, as if reluctant to grant them entry into this realm of the dead. Lily clutched her mother's hand, her eyes wide at the vastness of the place. The bouquet of white lilies trembled slightly in her other hand, the delicate petals a stark contrast to the austere surroundings. "We'll need help finding the grave," Emily murmured, her voice shaky. She spotted a small brick building near the entrance. That must be the caretaker's office. They approached and knocked on the faded door. An elderly man with thinning grey hair and a tired expression answered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice raspy as if unused to speaking. "Good afternoon," Emily began, trying to maintain her composure. "We're looking for the grave of John Miller. Can you help us?" The caretaker frowned, scratching his head. "John Miller, you say? Let me check the records." He disappeared inside the small office, leaving Emily and Lily in tense silence. Minutes ticked by, feeling like an eternity. Finally, the caretaker returned, a puzzled expression on his wrinkled face. "I'm sorry, Ma'am, but I can't find any record of a John Miller buried here." Emily felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. But that's impossible. I buried him here myself 8 years ago." The caretaker shrugged helplessly. "The records don't lie, Ma'am. Perhaps there's been some mistake." Lily, who had been silent until then, suddenly squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes fixed on a distant point in the cemetery. "I think I know where we need to go." Before Emily could protest, Lily pulled her along, guiding her through the rows of tombstones. There was a determination in her steps, as if she were being led by an unseen force. "Lily, wait!" Emily gasped, struggling to keep up. "How do you know where you're going?" The girl didn't answer immediately, her eyes focused on something only she seemed to see. "I just... No, Mom. It's like someone is showing me the way." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. Her daughter's words echoed in a disturbing way. After several minutes of walking, Lily stopped abruptly in front of a grave. Emily stared at the headstone, her heart nearly stopping as she saw the plot number engraved on the stone. "This is the number," she murmured, incredulous, "the number of your father's grave." But when her eyes focused on the name inscribed below, Emily felt the world tilt. "David Miller? No, it can't be." Lily let out a small cry of surprise. "Mom, it's the name from my dream, the man Daddy was pointing to." Emily staggered, gripping a nearby headstone for support. Her mind reeled, trying to process what she was seeing. How was this possible? How could John's grave bear another man's name? And how could Lily have dreamt of this specific name? "Something is very wrong here," Emily murmured, a wave of nausea washing over her. Her legs trembled, threatening to give way. Lily, noticing her mother's distress, helped her to sit on a nearby bench. "Mom, are you okay? Do you want me to get some water?" Emily shook her head, unable to form words. Her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions and terrifying possibilities. It was then that a movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Emily turned her head, and her heart nearly stopped. There, a few yards away, stood the mysterious woman from the bus. The elderly woman stood between two graves, her gaze fixed on Emily and Lily. There was something in her posture, a mixture of expectancy and knowledge, and that sent shivers down Emily's spine. "Lily," Emily whispered, her voice trembling, "do you see that woman over there?" Lily followed her mother's gaze and nodded. "Yes, it's the woman from the bus. What's she doing here?" Before Emily could answer, the elderly woman began to approach slowly. Her gait was steady, purposeful, belying her frail appearance. "I see you found what you were looking for," the woman said as she drew near, her voice laden with a meaning Emily couldn't decipher. "Who are you?" Emily asked, a mixture of fear and curiosity in her voice. "How did you know we'd be here?" The woman smiled, an enigmatic smile that seemed to hold ancient secrets. "Let's just say I'm someone who's familiar with the stories of this cemetery. And as for knowing you'd be here, well, some things are simply meant to be." Lily, who had been observing the interaction in silence, suddenly spoke. "You know something about my father, don't you? Please, tell us." The elderly woman looked at Lily, her eyes softening. "Ah, my dear, the truth isn't always simple or easy. But I can tell you this, not everything is as it seems in this place. Stones may lie, but hearts do not." Emily stood up, a sudden determination taking hold of her. "Please, if you know something, tell us. We came here looking for answers." The woman nodded slowly. "And answers you shall have. But first, you must be prepared to question everything you think you know." She paused, looking meaningfully at the grave of David Miller. "Sometimes, the living hide among the dead, and the dead walk among the living." With these cryptic words, the elderly woman turned and began to walk away, leaving Emily and Lily stunned and filled with new questions. "Wait," Emily cried out. But the woman had already disappeared among the tombstones as mysteriously as she had appeared. Mother and daughter looked at each other, the realization that they were on the verge of a revelation that could change everything hanging heavily between them. The cemetery, once a place of closure and farewell, now seemed like the beginning of a journey far greater than either of them could have imagined. The afternoon sun began to dip behind the clouds, casting long shadows across the cemetery. Emily and Lily walked slowly among the tombstones, the mysterious woman's cryptic words still echoing in their minds. "Mum," Lily whispered, clutching Emily's hand, "look." Emily followed her daughter's gaze and felt her heart quicken. There, a few yards away, was a headstone that matched the plot number they were looking for. With hesitant steps, they approached. As they drew closer, Emily felt her legs weaken. The name engraved on the cold stone wasn't John's. Instead, it read in clear, undeniable letters, "David Miller." "No," Emily murmured, her voice barely audible. "It can't be." Lily looked at her mother, confused. "Mom, who is David Miller?" Emily closed her eyes, long-buried memories resurfacing with overwhelming force. He was my first boyfriend. In high school, before I met your father." "But how?" Lily asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why is his grave where Daddy's should be?" Emily shook her head, unable to find an answer, her eyes fixed on the date of death, engraved on the headstone, March 15th, 2016. She felt the world spin around her. "That date," she murmured, more to herself than to Lily. "That's 3 years after your father's supposed accident." Lily, who was examining the headstone more closely, suddenly let out a surprised exclamation. "Mom, look at this!" She pointed to a small inscription almost hidden at the base of the headstone. Emily leaned in to read, "The truth hides in plain sight, J.M." "J.M.," Lily repeated slowly. "John Miller." "Mom, is that from Daddy?" Emily didn't answer. Her gaze had been drawn to the neighboring headstone. There, framed in bronze, was a photograph that made her heart stop for an instant. It was John, older than she remembered, with streaks of grey at his temples, but unmistakably him. His smile, that smile she knew so well, seemed to look directly at her across the years. With trembling hands, Emily reached out to touch the headstone, her eyes fixed on the photograph. It was then that she noticed the date of death, January 10th, 2024. "No," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "It can't be. This is impossible." Lily, who had joined her mother, looked from the photo to Emily and back again. "Mom, is that Daddy? But how?" "The date." Emily felt the world spinning around her. The implications of what she was seeing were too much to process. John alive until just a few months ago. The mysterious inscription on David Miller's grave. Nothing made sense. "He was alive," Emily whispered, her voice choked with emotion. All this time he was alive. It was then that the reality of the situation hit her with full force. Years of grief, of anger, of pain, all based on a lie. John hadn't died in that accident. Somehow, for some reason, he had lived for another 10 years without her knowing. Emily's legs gave way, and she sank to her knees before the headstone, tears streaming freely down her face. "Daddy," Lily whispered, gently touching the photograph. "It really is you." Emily looked at her daughter, seeing John reflected in her features. How could she have been so blind? How did she not realize how much Lily looked like him? "Mom?" Lily's voice was filled with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" But Emily could barely hear her. The world around her began to darken at the edges. The shock, the confusion, the pain. It all swirled together into a maelstrom of emotions she couldn't control. "John," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "Why?" And then the world went black. Emily slumped to the side, unconscious, causing a cry of panic to escape Lily's lips. "Mom!" Lily screamed, falling to her knees beside Emily. "Mom, wake up! Please, wake up!" Tears of fear and confusion streamed down the girl's face as she gently shook her mother, trying to rouse her. The cemetery, which had held the promise of mystery and answers, now felt like a nightmare. "Help!" Lily cried, looking frantically around. "Someone, please help!" But the cemetery seemed deserted, the endless rows of silent tombstones bearing witness to her despair. With trembling hands, Lily grabbed her mother's cell phone, struggling to remember how to call 911. As she dialed, her eyes kept returning to the photo of her father on the headstone. "Dad," she whispered between sobs, "if you're really out there somewhere, please help us now." As if in answer to her plea, Lily heard hurried footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw the familiar figure of the mysterious woman from the bus rushing towards her. "Oh dear," the woman said, kneeling beside Emily. "Don't worry, your mother will be all right. The shock was too much for her, but she's strong." With surprising skill for someone her age, the woman helped to position Emily more comfortably, checking her vital signs. "Who are you?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "How did you know we'd be here?" The woman smiled gently. "Let's just say I'm someone who knows your family's story well. And as for knowing you'd be here, well, some things are simply meant to be." Before Lily could ask any more questions, Emily began to stir, her eyes fluttering open. What happened?" Emily murmured, looking disoriented. "Mom!" Lily exclaimed, hugging Emily tightly. "You scared us so much." The mysterious woman helped Emily to sit up, her gaze filled with understanding. "You had a bit of a shock, dear, but now, more than ever, you need to be strong. There's much more to uncover." Emily looked from the woman to John's headstone, fresh tears forming in her eyes. "He was alive," she whispered. All this time, the woman nodded solemnly. "Yes, he was, and the story behind it is more complex than you can imagine, but now is not the time for explanations. You both need to rest and process what you've discovered today." As she helped Emily to her feet, the woman added in a low voice, "Tomorrow, when you're ready, come meet me at the cafe on the corner. There's much more you need to know." With these enigmatic words, the woman gently guided them out of the cemetery, leaving behind the tombstones that held secrets yet to be revealed and a past that refused to stay buried. The rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor was the first sound Emily heard as she regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking against the fluorescent lights overhead. The familiar smell of antiseptic and the sight of white walls confirmed her suspicions. She was in a hospital. "Mom?" Lily's voice, filled with concern, came from somewhere to her right. Emily turned her head, meeting her daughter's anxious gaze. "Hi, sweetie," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "What happened? You fainted at the cemetery, remember?" Lily explained, holding her mother's hand. The mysterious woman helped us call an ambulance. The memories came flooding back. The cemetery, the wrong headstone, John's photo. John! Emily felt her heart quicken, the monitor beside her reflecting her sudden agitation. "Calm down, Ma'am," a gentle voice interjected. An elderly nurse entered the room, her face lined with age but her eyes kind. "You need to rest." As the nurse checked Emily's vitals, something about her face seemed strangely familiar. The nurse must have noticed Emily's puzzled look, for she smiled softly. "Don't you recognize me, dear?" she asked. "It's Nurse Helen. I was on duty the night your husband was brought in, all those years ago." Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. You were there that night?" Nurse Helen nodded solemnly. "Yes, dear. And there's something you need to know, something that should have been said a long time ago." Lily, sensing the rising tension, squeezed her mother's hand in silent support. The nurse pulled up a chair, sitting beside the bed. Her face was serious, but there was compassion in her eyes. "Emily, your husband, John, he didn't die that night." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Emily felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "What?" she managed to stammer. "John survived the accident," Nurse Helen continued, her voice soft but firm. "He was in a coma for several months. We didn't know if he would wake up." Tears began to stream down Emily's face, but they told me he was dead. I saw a body." The nurse shook her head sadly. "What you saw was the body of David Miller, the driver of the other car. There was a mix-up in the initial identification." "A mix-up?" Emily repeated, incredulous. "So how is that possible?" Nurse Helen sighed deeply. "It was a chaotic night, many victims, much confusion. By the time we realized the mistake, it was too late. You had already been informed of John's death." "But why didn't anyone tell me the truth afterward?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Nurse Helen's expression grew even more somber. "So that's the hardest part to explain. When John finally woke up from the coma months later, he had completely lost his memory." Lily, who had been listening quietly until then, couldn't contain her gasp of surprise. "Daddy didn't remember anything." The nurse shook her head. "Nothing, not his name, not his past life. Nothing." Emily closed her eyes, feeling a sharp pain in her chest that had nothing to do with her physical condition. "Then why didn't they look for me? Why didn't they tell me he was alive?" Nurse Helen hesitated for a moment, as if carefully choosing her words. "There was interference. Someone with a lot of influence at the hospital decided it would be better for everyone if John started a new life, free from the complications of the past." "Who?" Emily demanded, her voice now laced with anger. "Who had the right to make that decision?" The nurse lowered her eyes. "Your mother-in-law, Emily, Mrs. Eleanor Miller." The shock was like a bucket of cold water. Emily had always known her mother-in-law disapproved of her marriage to John, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She lied to all of us?" Lily asked, her voice small and trembling. Nurse Helen nodded sadly. "She convinced the doctors that it was best for John to start over. She said that you, Emily, were already moving on, that it would be cruel to give you false hope." Emily felt a wave of nausea. Her entire life, all those years of grief and pain, based on an elaborate lie. "And John?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Did he ever regain his memory?" "Over time, small fragments began to return," Nurse Helen explained. "Size, but never enough for him to question the story he had been told. He was moved to another city, given a new name, a new life. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions and unanswered questions. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "All those years, lost." Nurse Helen placed a comforting hand on Emily's. "I know it's a lot to process right now, but you needed to know the truth. I've carried this secret for too long." Lily, with tears in her eyes, hugged her mother. "We're in this together, Mum. We'll figure out what really happened." Emily hugged her daughter back, feeling a mixture of gratitude for her support and a growing determination. Today's revelations were just the beginning. There were still many unanswered questions, many mysteries to unravel. As the sun set outside the hospital window, Emily made a silent promise to herself and her daughter. They would uncover the whole truth, no matter how painful or surprising it might be. And maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to mend what had been broken so many years ago. The hospital room was bathed in a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional beep of the monitors. Emily, still trying to process the shocking revelations, stared out the window at the night sky. Lily, exhausted by the day's events, had fallen asleep in a nearby chair. A soft knock on the door made Emily turn. Nurse Helen entered, carrying a thick, worn file. "Sorry to bother you so late," the elderly nurse said softly, "but I thought you might want to see this." Emily shifted in bed, curiosity and apprehension churning in her chest. "What is it?" Nurse Helen sat on the edge of the bed, opening the file. "These are records, notes, and some documents I've kept over the years. I think it's time you knew the whole truth." With trembling hands, Emily took the first paper Nurse Helen offered. It was an old photograph showing an elegant middle-aged woman with a stern expression. Emily recognized her instantly. "Eleanor," she whispered, her mother-in-law's name leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. Nurse Helen nodded gravely. Eleanor Miller, a powerful and influential woman, and unfortunately, the architect of this entire scheme. As Nurse Helen began to tell the story, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, revealing a picture of manipulation and deceit that Emily could scarcely believe. Eleanor Miller had never approved of her son's marriage to Emily. She saw Emily as a simple girl, lacking connections or social standing, unworthy of the Miller family heir. For years, she had tried to separate the couple, using her influence and money to create obstacles. "But you were strong together," Nurse Helen explained. "Nothing she did seemed to shake your love. Until that fateful night. The car accident that changed everything wasn't planned by Eleanor, but she saw it as an opportunity. When John was brought to the hospital, unconscious and gravely injured, Eleanor acted swiftly. She used her influence to isolate John," Nurse Helen continued. "She made sure no information about his true condition reached you, Emily." Emily felt hot tears streaming down her face. "But why? Why go to such lengths?" Nurse Helen sighed deeply. "Because she discovered something that changed everything for her. Something you yourself didn't know at the time." Gently, the nurse handed Emily an old pregnancy test. "Positive." I was pregnant," Emily stammered, shocked. Nurse Helen nodded. 3 months along, Eleanor intercepted the results before they reached you. To her, a grandchild was the final straw. She was determined to prevent this child from being born into the Miller family. The revelation hit Emily like a thunderbolt. Lily, her precious daughter, was the reason behind this elaborate scheme. When John finally awoke from his coma, months later, he had no memory, Nurse Helen continued. Eleanor saw this as the perfect opportunity. She recounted how Eleanor, using her influence and money, created a new identity for John. False documents were produced, stories fabricated, and even memories implanted through intensive therapy and psychological manipulation. She told John his name was Michael Stevens, that he'd been in a car accident while traveling for work. Nurse Helen explained, showing Emily forged documents with John's new name. And the worst part, she told him that his wife, Emily, had abandoned him after the accident, unable to cope with his condition. Emily felt a wave of nausea. "She made me the villain of the story." Nurse Helen nodded sadly. And to complete the charade, she even arranged a fake funeral with an empty casket, so you would believe John was truly dead. The pieces of the puzzle finally clicked into place. The rushed funeral, the closed casket, Eleanor's insistence that Emily move on immediately afterward. But how did she manage to keep this a secret for so long? Emily asked, still incredulous. Nurse Helen revealed more documents, confidentiality agreements, veiled threats, promises of rewards. She bought the silence of many. Those who threatened to speak were quickly silenced, one way or another. Emily glanced at Lily, still sleeping peacefully. And John Michael, did he never suspect? Over time, fragments of memory began to surface, Nurse Helen explained, but Eleanor was always there, twisting those memories, making him believe they were just dreams or fantasies. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily tried to absorb the magnitude of the betrayal, the extent of the lie that had shaped the last 8 years of her life. "Why are you telling me all this now?" Emily finally asked, her voice trembling. Nurse Helen looked out the window, an expression of regret on her wrinkled face. "Because Eleanor passed away 2 months ago. And on her deathbed, consumed by guilt, she confessed everything. She asked me to fix what she had broken." Emily felt a mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, shock, and a flicker of hope. "So John, does he know the truth now?" Nurse Helen shook her head. "Not completely. The truth is coming back to him in pieces. That's why he left that message on David Miller's headstone. He's searching for answers, just like you." Emily looked at Lily again, her heart swelling with determination. "We need to find him. We need to tell him about our daughter." Nurse Helen smiled softly, taking Emily's hand. "And you will, but first, you need to rest and recover. The journey ahead won't be easy." As Nurse Helen rose to leave, Emily called out to her one last time. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion, "for telling me the truth." The nurse nodded solemnly. "Sometimes, the truth is the only medicine that truly heals." With those words, she left, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts, surrounded by the fragments of a life she thought she had lost, but now had a chance to rebuild. The sun had barely risen when Emily and Lily left the hospital. The crisp morning air carried a sense of new beginnings, of unexplored possibilities. With the previous night's revelations still fresh in their minds, mother and daughter embarked on a journey that could change their lives forever. "Where do we start, Mum?" Lily asked, her eyes shining with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Nurse Helen gave us some clues about where John, or Michael as he calls himself now, might be living. We'll start there. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Emily and Lily scoured the internet, made phone calls, and even hired a private investigator to help with the search. Every lead, no matter how small, was followed with fierce determination. It was late in the afternoon, when fatigue was beginning to set in, that the breakthrough came. The private investigator called with news that made Emily's heart leap. "We found him," the investigator said, his voice conveying the excitement of the discovery. "Michael Stevens, formerly known as John Miller, is living in Oak Haven, a town just 2 hours from here." Emily felt her legs weaken, and she gripped the table for support. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Absolutely," the investigator confirmed. "We have his address and even some recent photos." As Emily received the details, a storm of emotions raged within her. Joy at knowing John was alive, anger at all the years lost due to Eleanor's manipulation, fear of what might happen when they finally came face to face. "Mom," Lily's voice brought her back to the present. "So what are we going to do now?" Emily looked at her daughter, seeing John reflected in her features, the same determination in her eyes, the same stubborn set of her chin. "We're going to find him," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We're going to bring your father back." The following hours were a flurry of preparations. Bags were packed, hotel reservations made, and a car rented for the trip. Amidst all the chaos, Lily disappeared into her room for a few hours. When she finally emerged, she carried a carefully wrapped package. "It's a present for Daddy," she explained shyly. "Do you think he'll like it?" Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sure he'll love it, sweetie." "What is it?" Lily carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a handmade photo album. Inside, there were drawings she had made over the years, imaginary scenes of a life with the father she never knew, picnics in the park, bike rides, family movie nights. Each page was a glimpse of what could have been and what still could be. "Oh, honey," Emily whispered, hugging her daughter tightly. "It's perfect." As night fell, Emily and Lily found themselves in the car, driving down the dark highway towards Oak Haven. The silence between them was thick with anticipation and apprehension. "What if he doesn't recognize us?" Lily finally asked, voicing the fear they both shared. Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "Then we'll make him remember. We didn't come this far to give up now." When they finally arrived in Oak Haven, it was well past midnight. The small town was asleep, the streets deserted except for an occasional cat or a lone car. Following the investigators' directions, they arrived on a quiet street lined with modest but well-kept houses. And there, at number 27, was John's or Michael's house. Emily parked the car across the street, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Lily could hear it. For long minutes they just sat there staring at the house. A soft light glowed through the curtains of the living room. Was he awake? What was he doing? Thinking? Remembering? "Should we go now?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Emily glanced at the clock, 1:15 a.m. No, she decided, even though every fiber of her being screamed at her to run to that door. It's too late. We'll wait until morning. Lily nodded, though the disappointment was evident in her face. Okay. They found a small motel nearby and checked in for the night, but sleep was elusive for both of them. Emily lay awake, tossing and turning, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How would John react to seeing her? Would he recognize her? And how would he handle the news that he had a daughter he never knew existed? As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the motel room curtains, Emily rose, exhausted but determined. Today was the day. Today, after 8 long years, she would finally see John again. "Lily," she called softly, waking her daughter. "It's time." Together, mother and daughter prepared in silence, each lost in their own thoughts and fears. Lily's handmade photo album was carefully placed in a bag, along with the photos and documents that proved their story. When they finally left the motel, the sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It was a new day, full of promise and possibilities. Standing in front of house number 27, Emily and Lily looked at each other, seeking courage in each other's eyes. "Ready?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Lily nodded, squeezing her mother's hand. "Ready." With a deep breath, Emily reached out and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house, marking the end of an era of lies and the possible beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Now, all they could do was wait, their hearts pounding in unison, for the door to open and reveal the man they had both waited so long to find. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, each second of silence that followed stretching into an eternity for Emily and Lily. Their hearts pounded so hard it felt like they might burst from their chests at any moment. Footsteps approached from the other side of the door. Emily squeezed Lily's hand, seeking and offering support at the same time. The doorknob turned slowly, and the door opened. There, standing before them, was John, older than Emily remembered, with streaks of grey at his temples and deeper lines etched around his eyes, but unmistakably him. His eyes, those eyes that Emily knew so well, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and a flicker of recognition. "Yes?" he asked, his voice sending shivers down Emily's spine. It was the voice she had heard in her dreams for so many years. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain 8 years of absence, of grief, of a lifetime lived apart due to lies? It was Lily who broke the silence. "Dad," she said, her voice small and hesitant. John blinked, looking at the girl as if seeing her for the first time. And in a way, that's exactly what was happening. "I'm sorry," he said, frowning. "I think you have the wrong address. I don't have any children." Emily finally found her voice. "John," she began, but then corrected herself. "Michael. My name is Emily, and this is Lily." "Are your daughter?" The shock on John's face was palpable. He took a step back as if Emily's words were a physical blow. That's not possible," he murmured. I don't remember." "Can we come in?" Emily asked softly. "There's a lot we need to talk about." Still visibly shaken, John nodded and opened the door wider, allowing them to enter. The living room was cozy, with pictures on the walls that showed glimpses of the life John, or Michael, had built for himself over the past few years. They sat down, a heavy silence hanging over them. Lily took the photo album out of her bag, clutching it like a talisman. "I don't understand," John finally said, his voice trembling. How is this possible?" Emily took a deep breath and began to tell the story. She spoke about the accident, about how she had been informed of his death, about the years of grief and pain. She explained about Eleanor's manipulation, the elaborate lies, the forged documents. As she spoke, John's face went through a myriad of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a deep sadness. I have flashes," he admitted when Emily finished. "Memories that don't make sense, dreams of a life I don't recognize. But I never imagined." He looked at Lily, who was watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. "You're really my daughter?" Lily nodded, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. With trembling hands, she held out the photo album. "I made this for you," she said softly. John took the album, flipping through it slowly. Each page, each drawing, seemed to awaken something within him. Buried memories, long-forgotten feelings. I don't remember any of this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "But it feels like I should." Emily leaned forward, taking John's hand. The familiar touch sent a wave of emotions through her. "Tell us," she pleaded softly. "What happened to you all these years?" John closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. When he opened them again, there was a mixture of pain and determination in his gaze. "I woke up in a hospital with no memory," he began. "They told me my name was Michael Stevens, that I'd been in a terrible car accident. A woman, Eleanor, was there. She said she was my mother." He paused, the pain evident in his voice. "She told me I was single, that I had no family other than her. I spent months in rehab trying to rebuild a life I didn't remember living." John, or Michael, as he had become, recounted the following years, how he struggled to rediscover himself, to build a new identity. He spoke about his job as a teacher at a local school, about the relationships he tried to form, but that always felt incomplete somehow. "I always felt like something was missing," he admitted, "like there was a hole in my life I couldn't fill." Emily and Lily listened in silence, tears flowing freely down their faces. John's pain, the loneliness he had endured, was palpable in every word. "About a year ago, I started having dreams," John continued. "Vivid dreams of a different life, of you, Emily." He looked at her, their eyes meeting. "I didn't know who you were, but I felt like it was important." He recounted how those dreams led him to question his reality, to investigate his past. How little by little, he began to unearth the truth. "When Eleanor passed away 2 months ago, she left a letter confessing everything," John said, his voice trembling with emotion. "It was like the world I knew came crashing down. Everything was a lie." He looked at Lily, his eyes filling with tears. "But I never imagined I had a daughter. How could I not have known?" Lily, unable to contain herself any longer, threw herself into John's arms. He hugged her instinctively, as if his body remembered something his mind had forgotten. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, holding her tight. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you." Emily watched the scene unfold, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. It was painful to see all the lost time, but there was also hope for a new beginning. "What happens now?" she asked softly, when father and daughter finally separated. John looked from Emily to Lily, a new determination in his eyes. "I don't know exactly," he admitted, "but I know I want to get to know you both. I want to make up for lost time if you'll give me the chance." Lily smiled through her tears. "Of course we will, Dad." Emily nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. "It will take time," she said. "We have a lot to process, a lot to heal." John took Emily's hand, intertwining their fingers as he used to do so many years ago. "We have all the time in the world now," he said softly. As the morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the room, a new sense of possibility hung in the air. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and complex emotions, but for the first time in 8 long years, Emily, John, and Lily were together. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been stolen from them. And despite everything, there was hope. Hope that the love that had once bound them together could be strong enough to overcome even the most elaborate lies and the lost time. The day passed in a blur for Emily, John, and Lily. Sitting in John's living room, they shared stories, laughter, and tears, filling in the gaps of 8 years of separation. Lily, excited and curious, bombarded her father with questions about his life, his likes, his memories. John, in turn, drank in every word and gesture of his newfound daughter, marveling at the resemblance he saw between them. "She has your smile," he commented softly to Emily at one point, his eyes shining with emotion. As the day wore on, John began to share more about his recently recovered memories. "It started with dreams," he explained, his voice tinged with wonder. "Fragmented images, familiar sensations. At first, I thought they were just fantasies." He recounted how, in recent weeks, the memories had started to return with more force and clarity. "I remembered our first date," he said, looking at Emily with a tender smile. "That coffee shop on the corner by the university. You dropped your book and I picked it up." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "You remember that?" John nodded, reaching out to take her hand. "And more. Our wedding, our honeymoon at the beach, and fragments, but so real." Lily, listening intently, suddenly remembered something. She rushed to grab her backpack, pulling out the drawing from her dream. "Dad, look at this," she said, handing him the paper. John took the drawing, his eyes widening in recognition. It was a picture of him standing next to a grave, pointing at something. How did you know about this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I dreamt it," Lily explained, "before we knew you were alive. It was this dream that led us to the cemetery." John looked from Lily to Emily, an expression of awe on his face. "I did that," he said softly. "I went to the cemetery, looking for answers. I left a message on David Miller's headstone, hoping someone would find it." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. It was as if the universe had conspired to reunite this family, using dreams and coincidences to guide them back to each other. As night fell, the conversation turned to the future. "What happens now?" Lily asked, her voice filled with hope and a touch of apprehension. Emily and John looked at each other, years of love and pain reflected in their gazes. "It won't be easy," Emily began, her voice soft but determined. "We have a lot to process, a lot to heal." John nodded, gently squeezing Emily's hand. "But if you're willing, I'd like to try. To build something new, something better." "Like a family?" Lily asked, her eyes shining with hope. "Yes," John replied, smiling at his daughter. "Like a family." In the days that followed, they had long discussions about how to deal with the past and move forward. They decided that John would seek therapy to help him process his recovered memories and the transition back to his true identity. Emily also agreed to seek professional help to deal with the trauma and loss she had experienced. For Lily, they promised to be open and honest, answering her questions and helping her understand the complex situation they were in. "We can't change the past," Emily said one evening, as the three of them sat in John's garden, watching the stars. "But we can choose how we move forward." John agreed, his arm around Lily's shoulders. "Every day will be a new opportunity for us to create memories together." In the months that followed, John began the process of reintegrating into his former life. He reconnected with old friends, explained the situation to his colleagues, and slowly began to reconcile his two identities, John and Michael. Finally, 4 months after their initial reunion, John made the decision to move closer to Emily and Lily. He found an apartment just a few blocks from their house, allowing them to spend time together regularly while still maintaining their own space to process and heal. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, 6 months after their reunion, the family was gathered at the local park. John was pushing Lily on the swings, their laughter echoing through the playground. Emily watched them from a nearby bench, her heart filled with a joy she hadn't felt in years. "Hey, you two," she called out. "Come here. I have a surprise." John and Lily approached, curious. Emily pulled 3 plane tickets out of her bag. "What's this?" Lily asked, taking one of the tickets. Emily smiled, looking from her daughter to John. "I thought it was time we took our first family vacation. What do you say to a week at the beach?" Lily's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? We're going?" John looked at Emily, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Sounds perfect," he said, reaching out to take her hand. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, the small family stood together, excitedly planning their upcoming adventure. There were still challenges ahead, memories to reclaim and wounds to heal. But in that moment, surrounded by love and the promise of a new beginning, Emily, John, and Lily knew that, together, they could face anything. The future, once so uncertain and bleak, now shimmered with possibilities. And as they walked back home, hand in hand, they knew this was just the first of many new memories they would create together.